Welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU 2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
Headline on the CUInsight story grabbed my attention. AI for credit unions, making people first work even better. The author, Bonnie Ortiz, has also been a CU 2.0 podcast guest before, so I wanted to get her back on the show. Ortiz is the founder of O2 Consulting Group. Early in her career, she was the long-serving COO at the Partnership Credit Union. She's a level-headed expert on matters credit union. And in today's AI froth, her voice is one that's rooted in credit union realities. It's a refreshing voice. In her CUInsight piece, she lays out 3 steps for implementing and getting results from AI initiatives in credit unions. Her counsel is practical, realistic, and let's be honest, too many credit unions think they're getting started in AI, but many are at best dabbling and can point to scant actual results. You want results? You get a formula for getting them. Ortiz in the show talks in detail about the 3 steps. Take notes. You're going to want to heed her counsel. Listen up. So we're going to talk about AI, and what caught my interest was a piece you wrote for CUInsight where you outlined a 3-step program for actually doing it in a credit union. As you know, and I know, credit unions are talking about AI, but not doing much with it because basically they don't know where the heck to start. And,
That's true. And they're scared. They're afraid of a few things, and none the least of which is understanding what the costs are, versus the impact that, use may have on the credit union. But more importantly, I think that they are also very afraid that they're going to move away from that people first kind of mentality, where folks believe that AI is going to replace them. And so smaller and mid-sized credit unions are just a little leery from probably 3 standpoints before they jump.
I think also there's probably rising employee hostility towards AI. At least that's what the polls say.
Yes, absolutely. Because they believe that the more AI that is used, the less and less relevant, they're going to become to the organization.
Well, the word Luddite, Luddite, people use that word and that's usually used to mean someone who's anti-technology. Well, actually, what the Luddites were people working in some kind of fabric mill in England a couple hundred years ago. And the owners put in these fancy looms or something that were putting workers out of work, being fired. So the workers got together and broke the damn looms.
And again,
they were not anti-technology; they were anti-job loss.
That's right, anti-job loss. And I will also tell you that in the credit unions that I'm supporting right now, I have a number of what I would consider mid-sized credit unions that are using it, but using it sparingly for things like minutes and to help people with designing an email or a document that reads much better than they may be able to put together on their own. But at times, folks get carried away, because they're not trained or coached on really what to use and how to use it. So they take the approach that they're going to use it to do everything for themselves in terms of writing. And they don't bother to go back and look at what AI has written on their behalf based on what they've asked it to structure. And then it comes across to their colleagues as if, they know that isn't the way that person speaks. It's not the way they generally approach things. And so then they get offended, that AI has taken over the world, and it's making us all into people that we're not.
All that said, And I am sympathetic to the employee worries about AI. All that said, AI is coming in the same way. I'm an old guy. I remember when PCs invaded the workforce circa 1984, 85. There was a lot of hostility about this would create job loss, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't actually create that much job loss, I don't think, but there was a lot of fear about that. And nonetheless, I knew these things were the future. There was no doubt in my mind. I also think AI is the future. That doesn't mean that we let AI tell us how to use it. We get to do that ourselves, at least for now. So,
I agree with you, and I really think that at the end of the day, it's all about the member and the staff experience. And it isn't any different than when I started preaching the values of project management to credit unions many years ago when they could barely spell project management. You know, the person in the organization that had the warmest pulse that day got the next initiative, and they had to be doing their day-to-day job as well as managing projects, whether they were simple or complex. Now, so many years later, project management is an accepted practice, and it hasn't eliminated nor even decreased the number of people that are needed to grow an organization. In fact, it has really done the opposite. It has created some jobs in some organizations that can afford to stand up a PMO, and it's also, you know, importantly impacted the way in which members are, have products brought to market quicker, that have better response times, that have feature functionality added to products and services that they already have in a faster way. And it is certainly a better experience for the staff from an organization and detail perspective. Same thing with AI. It's not a replacement, in my opinion, for human capital. It's really helping us to stretch or expand our bandwidth, and it's also helping us to improve productivity so that we can better respond to the members in particular, because they sit in the center of everything we do, and making sure that they're getting what they need, but also making the response time from the credit union appear to be much better than it ever was before.
now what's the size range of the credit unions you work with? Big credit
Uh,
unions over $2 billion are tackling AI in a very different way. Not necessarily a more efficient way, but they're tackling it in a very different way.
so my client base ranges everywhere from just under 100 million to over 1.5 billion. And I have credit unions at all sizes and levels of complexity that are attempting to use it, including the $1 billion credit unions. I just completed a project with a $750,000 in asset credit union who is beginning to use it very effectively for what I call the administrative tasks, minute taking and, other things that I just referenced earlier. But they are also using it for things like resource planning and helping to build out project management plans and the breakdown of the work that goes into those plans in a better, more efficient way. They're not missing as many things, and they're becoming, more proficient, in those areas. The smaller credit unions that I have are really, as you said earlier, they're struggling to determine, what do I do? When do I do it? And how do I do it? What do I invest in? And for those credit unions, I generally will recommend to them that they start where the pain is. The first step in my blog was, start where the friction is. And it's not dissimilar to any other gap analysis that you might do. And I go into all kinds of credit unions looking holistically at the enterprise and also looking at various departments depending upon where the CEO and the leadership feel that they have the most pain. And we can do it either way. But even when you're looking holistically at the credit union, you can start looking in various areas like the back office, where you know that there is often way too much work to be done and not enough efficiency or effectiveness coming out of there, and start to decide what sorts of initiatives are going to give you the most impact. So where am I going to get the most return on investment? And that's not just dollar return on investment, but also return on investment from what the members are going to realize out of that initiative. And also, with the staff is once the staff buys into, the solution and start using it and they really start liking it, then all of a sudden, things change.
Well, one of my favorite examples of AI implementation is at a credit union that's using AI to do most of the collections
Yeah.
processing. And the reason I like that is if I'm working in a credit union, my CEO comes up and says, "Hey, we're going to assign you to collections." I'm going to say, "No, I'm quitting, man. I ain't going to make those calls.
Yeah.
It's painful. People curse at me. I mean, don't need
Well,
that." So you take that away from a lot of people. They're going to say, "Great, the machine could take the abuse. That's wonderful. I don't need to do that."
we always talk about the speed of doing things, right? And speed has its place. So definitely we want to make those collection calls quickly. We want to make them consistently, and we certainly don't want to get abused in the process of doing it. But we also want to maintain relevance. We want to make sure that the call is done effectively. And one of the things I love about AI is the patterns that it can create and help you with. So the more you use it, whether it's in collection activity or it's in lending, and one of my favorite areas is in lending, because I can't tell you how many times that I go into credit unions simply because the chief lending officer or the CEO is very interested in why their turnaround time is so long and why they can't make better use of the conversations that surround loans to include more services, whether those are insurance services like GAP and AD&D and, credit life and credit disability. These AI solutions can help to develop those patterns from the questions that members will ask on a repeated basis and lead you to an opportunity to build out your scripts, so that you're not just doing a repetitive task, but you're also moving that conversation when you do speak to the member forward. So, it's a boon for not just the operational needs you have, but the growth needs you have, to continue to put more loans on the books and, to continue to do more with less. And there's no question that we want to be more efficient so that we don't have to always add staff to a team to gain a little bit more. And, that's another place where those patterns for resource planning can really help you, because where your speed bumps are. You know when it's time to add that next person. I struggle with that in my own organization because depending upon the level of work that we have, the number of clients we have, the number of initiatives and their complexity, I often want to hire another person, but I may not have exactly the right amount of work right now. But if I can use my model to build out on that, then all of a sudden I know here's when I need a half a person, here's when I need, more than that. And when I'm now toppled over to, I better get somebody on board right away. And that works so well for organizations that are looking at departments that are growing and growing quickly. In member services, right now I'm working with an organization in the DC area where we're using it to help us to determine what that staffing model is going to look like for full versus part-time individuals, to be able to put people in the place they need to be at the time they need to be there, no more, no less. And it's working beautifully.
Well, I think, and you touched on this in your CUInsight piece, credit unions can use AI to speed up processing in many cases.
Hmm.
Historically, most credit unions took them forever to process a loan application.
Hmm.
maybe I'm wrong. You'll know if I am. I view loan applications a little bit as like applications to a selective college. They know this 30% is getting in, this 30% we're rejecting, and then there's something in the middle where they actually think about it. I think loan applications are the same. There's some that, okay, clearly it's an 800 FICO score, no debt. I'm approving this damn thing. It's a
Hmm.
250 FICO score. Oh, hey, no, just say goodbye. No, thanks.
The interesting thing about that loan turnaround process is it's built out of sometimes the inefficiency of our policies and our the multitude of due diligence activities that we have to perform in order to feel that we are as averse of risk as we can be, because fraud is a big deal. So this is another area where I not only agree with you that in the underwriting process, in the loan processes for small and let's call them credit unions at the 300 million to 500 million range, their underwriting can be incredibly sped up by making sure that they're taking advantage of the AI solutions that are in place that are embedded in loan origination systems, core systems that have, more progressive loan platforms and making use of the patterns that they allow you to create and feel comfortable with on a real-time basis so that when you decide to issue a loan based on, not just a score, but you build your own criteria. If it has these three things, I'm going to, I'm going to approve that loan immediately. I don't even have to touch it. It's going to be improved, approved as it goes through the system. And then you can continue to change those patterns and modify them, kind of tailor them, if you will, to the various paper groups, to the various needs and, and requirements of both the credit union and the members themselves, for what they want. So lending is ripe for AI and what it can offer, and it doesn't have to be a burden that comes to the credit union because you don't really know how to operate it. Those AI solutions are built in oftentimes or options that come with the loan origination systems that folks either already have or they're looking at right now. So if you are looking to change your core, if you're looking to change your LOS, and migrate to another solution, you need to be aware and ask the right questions. What tools that reflect AI patterns are included, in that solution? And the unfortunate thing is oftentimes the smaller credit unions just don't know what they don't know. So they don't know the right questions to ask.
I think that a lot of the compliance that small and mid-sized credit unions complain about a great deal, the compliance burden, can also be delegated to AI. I mean, am I totally off base on that? It's a suspicious activity report. Seems to me there's got to be some cases where you say, let's think about this. Most of the time, it's clearly suspicious or it's not.
Well, again, we're talking patterns, and AI can see patterns. So in almost every solution that a credit union looks at today, they're asking the question, what is in your fraud stack? So I don't care if you're looking at an account opening product, if you're looking at a loan origination system, if you're looking at a collections module, no matter what you're signing up for, you're looking at what is in that fraud stack. The more effective fraud stacks contain AI to create those patterns because, as you said, they're detecting things in real time and they're also building upon the usage. So every time, the parameters that we set up are set first, and then, we begin to monitor and look at each of those patterns, and we can more readily adjust for what those tell us what reports we can get, out of the system, and how we use them. So it's another way of turning data into information for sound decision making. You know, a kind of a slogan that was used way back in the day, but it's still true today.
A lot of credit unions are rightfully concerned about synthetic identity fraud, but it seems to me AI can be useful in detecting synthetic identities.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes AI has created the synthetic identity. So what the heck? Let's turn the weapon back on them.
hmm Well, exactly. And that's why I say that it's so important to start where your pain is. If you are being fraught with fraud way over and above your competition, then that's the place to look. That's the place to start. How can I solve this problem? How can I manage the problem and mitigate the risk that I have to the best of my ability? But the most important thing is to start where that pain is. If it's in your back office, if it's in your EFT department, it may be fraud related. It may just be, the way in which you're going about, looking at overdraft privilege, collections, which is, at times considered a back office function because it kind of gets moved around like a hot potato sometimes, doesn't really belong in lending, so that you don't compromise that. Doesn't really belong in accounting and finance. And, so we have a little trouble deciding, where does it go and where is it most effectively managed? It can be in the project management area, and it can be just as simple as putting it into your administrative areas and trying it out. But absolutely, you need to understand your organization well enough to know where will this help me, and then what are the specifics of what that looks like. Because the worst thing to do is to say, I'm just going to put it everywhere. So now you have 10 or 15 initiatives going on at one time. You're not concentrating on any one of them. Most of the time, they don't have an owner, and you're not tracking them. So that lack of buy-in, that confusion, that chaos that you and I were talking about earlier in the discussion, they find themselves to the forefront, and all of a sudden your initiative just goes away.
You're
Do
talking now about your second step. Keep it focused, not fragmented.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm familiar with credit unions that have a lot of little tiny kind of ad hoc AI projects going. But I don't even know if anybody's monitoring the results. It's kind of like, oh yeah, why don't you go off and do that? That sounds cool. Get back to me if you have anything to say. That's not going to lead to too much, I don't think.
It isn't. And that leads to what I was, alluding to earlier, that if all you're doing is, turning on Copilot for everybody, when they're in their email and letting them have at it, they're not being taught how to use it appropriately. They're not being coached as to how they should be monitoring it, how they should be using it effectively so that they keep their identity and they make sure that the quality of what they're sending out is at its top best. Because anytime that AI creates something for you, you must read it over because it doesn't always accurately grab to 100% what you were thinking. So you take it, you use the best of it, and then you tailor it, to be sure that when you send it out, it is accurate. But when you have that going on across the entire organization, no one is using it in a standard fashion and no one's tracking it. Why? Because you don't have an owner and you don't have somebody who is bought into the fact that you're using it for a purpose, to get impact, to get a return on the investment, and to make sure that you are aware of what staff is doing or not doing. Because many times you're, spending money for licenses that nobody's using because, they either don't want to or they have some aversion to it and they're not going to do it until they're absolutely forced to do it. So, yes, I absolutely say focus on two or three initiatives. Obviously, if you're a bigger organization, credit unions over $1 billion can likely afford to have a few more things going on, but they still have to be careful so that they're bringing all of that together in a way that, decides on what the value was at the end of the day and what they want to do next. So having an overarching plan for AI that starts with that assessment of the organization or departments within the organization then leads to the focus, because it allows you then to know we're going to do this one first. And then when we get the results of that and we can measure those results, then we can decide, do we want to move to the initiative that we had second on our list, or is it better if we move to the third one? Or do we stop?
And I think the credit union needs to also go into it with some concrete sense of what a successful result would look like.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just, use Copilot all week every time it occurs to you, and then we'll talk about what you got.
Well,
Don't know exactly what that would produce.
as a project manager at heart, or always having project management on the mind, my inclination is always to create a plan, conceptualize, create a plan, and then execute on that plan. And then this is no different. Making sure that you have a plan for what you're doing based on, a tracking mechanism. So what is the outcome that I was looking for? What are my goals and objectives? What is the scope of what I'm trying to do? How long is it going to take me to monitor this before I can get some reasonable patterns and results, reports that can help me to decide what do I do next? So that's,
If you get an outcome that's totally different from what you expected, I think you need some flexibility where you don't say, oh, that's bad. Maybe it's good.
correct.
AI is still a totally new sort of tool. And every once in a while, it's going to produce something. Hey, I didn't think it could do this, but there it did it. So, and if it's good, embrace it.
For years, we have been moving from standard planning methodologies to more agile, flexible models. And that's exactly what those do. You decide on the period of time that you're going to pilot something, or you make a plan that has 3 or 4 or 5 steps in it, but you do step one and you stop and you check where you're at. And then you decide, what kind of a result did I get? And what do I want to do about that? And then you move to the next step so that you're not so far down the line that you've invested and lost so much that you don't want to recover. You don't even want to try it again. It's better to put that plan in place and take it in smaller steps and even work hand in hand with your vendor partners that you feel have credible solutions in place, whether that's maybe your core who has initiatives going on that can help you across a lot of different areas within the organization, or it may be, in solutions that you've decided you had to layer on for a variety of things that we've already talked about: collections, fraud, overdraft, lending. And lending can certainly be separated even at that. Is it your loan processing that you're trying to look at, or is it your loan underwriting, or is it both? Maybe it's the funding process, but you don't know until you really dive in and determine where you think, that number one pain is. Well, once you get to the point where you have tried things and you got enough reporting that you can look at what you've got, then you not only have buy-in, but you have evidence. So you've got evidence of what you have seen, and then you have a roadmap that you can build, to move forward.
Do most of the institutions that you work with, is their AI contact primarily Copilot?
I would say yes from an administration perspective, but I would say no from a AI solution that is embedded in a system. So, we were talking about loan origination systems and other kinds of systems that are using AI embedded, which frankly is why auditors today are really looking at the requirements for credit unions to do product assessments. Because, AI is like anything else. AI has its faults as well as its positives. And so, more and more auditors and NCUA examiners are requiring not only solution assessments, but various product module assessments. I'm working with a credit union right now who is adding a voice AI component to their call center
Hmm.
because they don't have the manpower, nor do they want to run shift work for folks. They've got members that are complaining that they can't get to the credit union in the odd hours. They have an international base, and they have people all over the world, in that have working out of different time zones. And so people want to be able to reach the credit union, at various times throughout the day and the week. And they have finally decided that now that they have a unified communication system in place, they are going to use the voice AI system to allow for that. And so after hours, their members will be handled by this voice system, and parameters will be set to tailor it for them, and also patterns will be built up over time so that again they can use it for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, where they're starting to be able to build scripts to help them to know more and more about what the member really needs, so that when you are talking to the member, you're not wasting their time, you're getting right to the point, you're targeting them and providing them the information that they're looking for that's going to be most, impactful to them.
Now, credit unions that you work with, do they have concerns about data security in AI? I think, for instance, if I'm looking at a loan application and I really don't know what to do with it, maybe I'm tempted to put it into AI, but my inclination would be to take out the person's name and various other uniquely personal data points because I don't want that floating around an LLM system. I don't know where it winds up. It's
Mhm.
So I would still want to use the AI for its opinion, but I don't want to put Bonnie Ortiz's information in the model.
Mhm. Well, I would say that the short answer to your question is yes, they are concerned about that, and they have to be, because whether that AI solution is embedded in an LOS or whether, you're not using an LOS and you're manually underwriting and you're using a different AI tool to run that into. The most critical point there is to be sitting down as you set up that system and ensuring that it is operating against your parameters. So if you want certain pieces of data redacted, if you don't want data analysis to be done with certain PII, then you need to ensure that you have set up the system to extract it. That same credit union that I just talked about with the voice AI is taking a very assertive and I think proactive lead in data analysis to help them with targeted marketing. We're all worried about the retention of members. We're all worried about the engagement of members. And there are tools out there that can help us to identify certain patterns and certain reasons why members leave us, certain times when people leave us. There's a lot of information that can be gleaned, but you don't want to just feed your entire member database, into an engine that is going to churn out models that are unsafe and can get you in trouble with, the auditors and create an even more difficult situation than you may have when you don't use it. So you have to be working with a reputable organization or reputable tool, which is why you have to do your homework. You have to do the due diligence and make sure that you have assessed the product, the organization that's bringing it to you, and that you have certain guarantees for the outcomes that you're going to get.
Now, this is off topic, but is member retention a real issue with the credit unions that you work with? Because
Absolutely.
I've always seen it not as a question of retention, but engagement.
It's both.
To me, the worst thing is to have a bunch of people who are essentially inactive
Hmm.
on the books as members, and I'm paying some fees for them populating various systems that I'm not getting anything back for that. And so my question is A, get them to quit. That would be better than the current situation. Or B, find a way to get them more engaged.
And
The-
and engagement is first. From the moment someone joins the credit union and is onboarded, that onboarding process is vitally important. And the older methods of onboarding members by, writing to them every couple of days or every month, or, sending them out various, marketing types of literature within periods of time isn't necessarily always working these days. So introducing new ways of targeting and personalizing your messages is becoming very important right from the beginning, so that you are getting them engaged, keeping them engaged throughout the process of the time that they're with you. But you do have occasions when retention is just pure retention. And what I mean by that is that there are still a lot of folks who are not as educated as you would think that they may be around credit unions and the use of them. So many people feel that, if I belong to a credit union while I'm working, but when I leave, when I leave the job where I was able to sign up for that credit union, I'm retired and I'm going to move, they will leave for various reasons. Sometimes, members leave because they just don't feel that the service is what they were expecting. Other times people leave because they want the convenience of having, a branch that they can walk into that is closer to them. And if they, live in DC and they retire to California, they may just want that. But again, knowing that up front is the answer to potentially being able to give them a solution that they're going to be comfortable with.
Principal credit union is 2,500 miles or so from where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kept them because I can do anything I want with them. I've used shared branching once or twice. I've used the ATM, shared ATM. That works a lot. So people don't have to leave a credit union just because they move out of
They
where the
do not.
nearest branch is.
And
So,
I would have thought that was, if somebody would have told me that, quite a while ago, I would have said, oh, you're kidding. I mean, everybody knows that you can stay with your financial institution.
well, quite a while ago, and I remember when I was a kid, and you get a job, you have a job in Washington D.C. You move to L.A., you got to have a job. You change banks because
Hmm.
no one in L.A. is going to take that D.C. check.
Yes.
They're going to say no, no, no.
Yes.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I changed financial institutions a lot until I was probably 50 years old, actually. So,
Well, and I also think that I don't think anybody today loses sight of the fact that our credit union demographics are broad, from the boomers and beyond, all the way down to, the preteens that are getting started thinking about, getting a savings account. The solutions are different and they're accepted differently by, all of those various generations. So that's why I said it's almost impossible to think about all the potential that could be there for keeping that person. But, first and foremost is education. And, one of the last things that I say in that list of steps to take when you're thinking about using AI is plan on a training and a coaching program, because your staff is not going to be bought into the initiative simply because it's AI potentially. But more importantly, they're not necessarily going to carry out your desired steps to get from the beginning of that project to the end of it, so you can find out what the real outcomes were. And so if they're not trained to know what they're doing, if they're not trained to seek the value in what that, AI solution can give them, and they don't practice it, and they're not coached along the way, then, you're not going to get a good outcome. You may not get any outcome at all. If you want to do this, you have to look for putting full emphasis, on even the smallest initiative, having a plan, training, and then holding those people accountable, through coaching. so that you're looking at what they're doing and you're asking questions and you're open to feedback and you make them a center of the solution.
Well, as you write, make in your CUInsight piece, make sure your teams understand how to use it, where it fits in their workflow, and how success will be measured.
Mhm.
And that's all excellent advice. Now, you go on to say we can end with this topic because credit unions often say to me, we are our people. Our people are what make us different. No one says, well, our computers are what make us different. That'd be
Mhm.
interesting if they said that. But you say AI gives credit unions the ability to scale what makes them special, delivering
Right.
better experience for members.
That's right. And the reason I say that is because going back to what I said earlier in the discussion, it's all about the member experience and the staff experience. And if the staff uses the AI tools that are afforded to them and they tailor them to themselves, then they are still presenting to the members who they really are and providing that differentiator in them and their enthusiasm and their passion and their service, but they're just doing it quicker in a more responsive manner. They're allowing themselves to take care of more of the member's issues because they know more about the member and they can focus on what that member's interested in and not what they think they're interested in. And so it just allows them to blossom, in a way that is exponentially scalable.
Yeah, and most of us are adults enough to know when we're happy dealing with a machine and when we want to talk to a person. I often, so you call a pharmacy. I use Walgreens, big national chain, and think bot comes on, says, what do you need? And sometimes they say, connect me to a pharmacist or something to that effect. Mostly I'll just, is my prescription ready for pickup, something like that. Yeah, the machine's perfectly capable of telling me that. I don't need to talk to a pharmacist. And do I feel like I've been cheated because I'm talking to the machine? No, it's quicker, it's faster.
It's
So,
quicker, it's faster. But let me stop you for a second and say, most of the time, when you invest in these tools, you have a certain amount of flexibility in the way you set them up. So you probably wouldn't be very happy if that AI, that chatbot, ask you 15 irrelevant questions before you got to the one you were most interested in. And
right.
there needs to be some knowledge of who the customer base is, in this case for credit unions, who their members are. And what they're really looking for, so that if there's half of them that want to speak to us, a member services rep immediately, they don't have to wait for 15 other things to be presented to them, because in setting that up, there's been a conscious effort to determine the patients and, in what order that those questions should be asked in.
And essentially, what you're saying is you would use AI to better set up the AI system. AI can certainly help in identifying a member who always wants to talk with somebody. That's fine.
That's
So,
right. And get them where they need to go quick, more quickly. And the staff on the back end know that the calls that they are going to get are going to be the ones that are going to be in need of the most service. And their transaction can be handled in a quicker way. And the complex ones, are set up in that order for them to be able to deal with.
now, I know a few CEOs of credit unions who decided to retire because they didn't want to mess with this AI beast. Yeah, they basically they said, I'm gonna in my career I've dealt with enough major challenges. I'm gonna leave this to the next generation. Have you encountered any people like that? And I'm not faulting these guys. They're 65 or female or women. Yeah, they say I'm done enough. This is a challenge for a new generation.
Yes, I have. I am glad to say that it isn't the vast majority of
No,
the people that
it's
I deal
not.
with,
It's definitely
but
not.
I've certainly encountered one or two. But I think that when that occurs, there's a deeper issue there. There's a deeper conversation, maybe not a deeper issue, a deeper conversation that needs to be held. Because if that same CEO, they've done a great job, they've had a wonderful career, it's just time. They don't have the energy or the passion to embark on this new phenomenon. And that's okay as long as they have appropriately set up a succession plan and the credit union can plan for their departure and move forward with someone at the helm who is going to want to take on not just AI, but any of the other, new initiatives that are going to come after. That's the good news. The bad news is when that hasn't happened, when there is no succession plan in place, when there has been no thought to, well, who's going to carry this torch after me? Or when there's too much time because there is no succession plan, there's not enough time for the credit union team that is left behind in the board to try to act quickly enough. And so they begin losing competitive ground because they're fighting to stay relevant.
Or they merge out of
And at
existence.
that point, merger is sometimes the answer.
Well,
Um,
if I remember my statistics right, a significant number of mergers of smaller credit unions, let's say under 500 million, is because there just wasn't a good succession plan.
that's correct. That's correct. There's plenty of credit union CEOs that have had fabulous careers. They may have been promoted from member services positions and lending positions and, positions all over the credit union all the way up to CEO. They really do feel as if it is in the best interests of the credit union members and staff for someone to take over who has the passion for the long term. And that's okay. But I would just hope that for them, they have established the right plans so that when they leave, credit union and the members are in great hands.
Before we go, think hard about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really, really, really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey at gmail.com. Robert McGarvey, again, that's rjmcgarvey at gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU 2.0 podcast.